Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is Bayonetta on PC. Well, that took a damn long time. As you are well aware, Bayonetta came out in 2010 for the Xbox 360 and just last week it released on the PC and caught me by amazing surprise because I was not aware it was coming to PC at all personally. So I went out, got it, played it a bunch, and here I am with my experiences for the PC version for Bayonetta. Before we dive into gameplay and talk a little bit about Bayonetta in general, I'd like to take a look at some of the PC options and talk a little bit about the PC version overall. Now, Bayonetta says and keeps saying that you should play it with a controller, and that is definitely the recommended way to play it. The analog sticks and movement controls really do tie into the whole spectacle brawler that Bayonetta most definitely is. But they have added full keyboard and mouse support with key rebindings on basically all the necessary keys, which is fantastic and phenomenal. This is not something you normally experience with Japanese developers, and Platinum Games themselves also have some experience with shoddy ports overall. So this is a very solid port in general. I don't really have a lot of issues with it in terms of video options. As I said, full rebindable keys are really good. They have camera support and camera controls, also really good. Sound settings are a little bit bland, just effects and music volume, but they do have a headphone mode, which is also kinda nice. Display settings do allow some changes, but there are a couple of weird ones here. The subtitle language can only be the Steam language, which is kinda strange. They do have both voice language for Japanese and English, which is fantastic. I suggest using the Japanese because it is much better voice acted than the English, which sounds like somebody's reading it off a script into the void and not really caring what they're saying. And then we have some other stuff here like the UI and user interface default settings, which you can change on your preference. Overall, nothing really to complain about. When we head into the graphical options menu, there are a couple of things here that do kind of baffle me a little bit. One of them is VSync on or off, which doesn't really make a lot of difference because the game is already locked at 60, and that is a little bit strange. Other than that, there's a couple of presets, some AA texture quality and texture filtering. Not the greatest option menu, but keeping in mind this is a console port from a game from 2010, it's not exactly terrible either. No real massive complaints. Overall, not a shoddy port in general. It's decently stable. I've had a few crash to desktops, which is not okay, but it isn't continual and it's also not the worst thing in the world. Save is good. Save progression is great. There is no save scumming that I've noticed. I've also not noticed any corruption of files or anything of the sort. The controls are immensely responsive. I'm playing this with a Steam controller and that works fantastically well, and I'm pretty sure your Xbox controller will work just fine. Keyboard and mouse also work fantastically well, especially considering this is a brawler slash spectacle fighter. No real complaints. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into the gameplay and talk a little bit about the actual variant of the PC port, what they've done different, what they've held the same. Hint, they've not done anything different, and what you can expect going into Bayonetta, a 2010 release in the year of current year 17. Let's go ahead and dive in. So diving into gameplay, there's three main components to talk about. First, there's the gameplay itself in regards to Bayonetta, its combat system, and hack and slash spectacle fighter glory. And then there is the port itself to the PC version and what it gives and doesn't give. So if you've played Bayonetta on the Xbox 360, you might remember that the game, well, had some issues in keeping its stable 60 FPS frame rate. It looked pretty, but it definitely struggled in some later action-packed sequences. And obviously it was 720p at best, so that was also not the greatest thing to see or do. And if you're looking back at it now in your beautiful 4K TV on an Xbox 360, it doesn't look that great. So in comes the PC version, which scales the game decently up to 4K support with stable 60 FPS at all times. Keeping in mind the FPS is locked at 60 at all times. You're never going to get 120, and that is, I think, a limitation of the engine. Most games from Japanese developers that come to console are physics locked to a FPS cap, and sometimes that's 30, and thankfully in Bayonetta's case that is 60. 60 is acceptable, no real complaints on that, and especially the support for up to 4K monitors is most welcome. There is no widescreen support, but again, in a game from 2010, I can kinda forgive that. It's not the greatest, they could have spent a little bit of extra time on that, but it's also not the end of the world. Having said that, the game has definitely aged in places. The art style and art design are still absolutely fantastic. The world building and overall animation quality is still second to none. And I'd argue the Bayonetta is still one of the best, if not the best, action-packed spectacle fighter on the market. There really isn't anything that compares to its fluid, action-packed combat. Combo building, enemy destroying, multi-tier boss fights, and massive chains of enemies destroying everything. but that does not mean the game hasn't visually aged, especially in areas where shadows and AA are a massive concern, foliage in the background, and things like destructible terrain that sort of appears up and left and right, and textures that don't really pop out that well. Sure, the character models, character animations, and overall quality of all of that looks fantastic, and the way they have done lighting hasn't aged at all. It's still amazingly beautiful, but you can see the game is a little bit dated when things like ground textures or wall textures feel exceedingly flat in many scenarios and situations. And again, it's a 2010 release, that is okay. Would it have been nice to get a full remaster for the PC release? Sure. Am I complaining that we got the game on PC and it's running smooth at stable at 60? Absolutely not. I'm overjoyed to be able to play this game on a PC in 2017 with solid 60 FPS frame rates and no dips, drops, or anything of the sort on any system I have available here. Absolutely fantastic. Bayonetta itself, in terms of combat fluidity, hasn't changed a bit. It is still the most action-packed, combo-driven, over-the-top, stiletto-wearing, gun-wielding, hair-dragon summoning, demon-fighting, angel-destroying girl with glasses. Bayonetta is and remains a classic, fantastic, action-packed title, and this release does not do it any injustice. Technical side of things aside, where it's aged a little bit in the graphic quality, the game does provide a solid set of changes that do allow the game to be played on modern systems, and that is the whole goal of the title. If you're expecting overhaul of content, UI, or story delivery, you're not gonna get that. And honestly, the game doesn't need it at all. It is still the same solid Bayonetta. Now granted, there are a couple of things here that we need to keep in mind in regards to the PC version. First, obviously, is the 60 FPS lock. Second is that all the cutscenes run at 30 FPS. And for cutscenes, I'm generally okay with that. It does pose some issues with recording the game, that it sort of switches around a little bit, but most people don't record games that way, so you shouldn't be having too many issues with that. The third thing though is the inclusion of VSync in cohesion with the FPS locking. In general, VSync is used by people to sort of smooth out the frames and get better performance in terms of screen tearing and a smoother gameplay experience. The downside obviously is a higher input lag, which for a high-octane spectacle fighter like Bayonetta, input lag is killer and it should never happen. And the game doesn't really have input lag that I've noticed, outside of the regular 60 FPS refresh rate for input timings. But the fact of the matter is, without VSync, the game has a tremendous amount of screen tearing that in some places I actually stopped and looked around hoping it would go away on its own. Continuous lines and 2 or 3 tears at any given time on both my desktop PC as well as my laptop encountered this issue. Now, it doesn't impact gameplay in terms of fluidity, and it doesn't impact gameplay in terms of the combat being less enjoyable in some fashion. Those are still fantastic, and nothing really takes away from that in any way, shape, or form, ever. But you do have to keep in mind that there are some issues in regards to that. Now, running the game with VSync enabled, I've not had any issues in regards to gameplay. But granted, I'm not the greatest player at these type of games, as you can see from the gameplay you're seeing now, and I make a lot of mistakes. So maybe if you are much more focused, much more skilled player than I am, you'd notice the issues with VSync and the input delay. Now, having said that, you might ask, well, what have they done then, outside of high resolution support and running the game on a PC at stable 60 FPS, which for Japanese developers is an accomplishment in and of itself? What have the developers done then to deserve this praise in regards to Bayonetta? Well, there is no real additional praise in regards to Bayonetta for the fact that it's now on PC. The fact they've done that, fantastic. And at the price of €20 or a regional equivalent, not a deal you shake your head at. It's pretty good. But it's still Bayonetta. So if you've played the 360 version and you've satisfied with your experience and you don't feel a need to play that again, that's fully warranted. But if you've never played the 360 version, or maybe you never owned an Xbox 360 or a PS3, which, to be fair, the PS3 version was a pile of garbage and unplayable in most scenarios, then it might be a good idea to take a look at Steam and see this €20 release of a fantastic ageless title that is sort of starting to show its age a little bit here and there. Again, they haven't really done anything in regards to the gameplay, so that means that Vigrid still feels bland and boring, especially on the aging graphics. But later, and especially Paradiso, look fantastic. Vibrant, unique art style with great animations on all enemies, and especially scenery that even with the aging graphics and the lack of proper AA in many scenarios, still feels fantastic. And you might be wondering, well, did we just see AA in the options menu earlier? And the answer is yes, but it doesn't appear to do anything. As far as I can tell, the AA currently in the game is, well, not there. And that is definitely a negative to the game. Also, keeping in mind, the game is still a console port. So many prompts in the game, even if you're switching from a keyboard to a mouse, still show up as console icons in relation to a console's 4-button configuration. Not everything by a long shot, but definitely some of the icons, like the fatality icons or the gigaton icons you see on screen, do show up as icons in relation to the console variant, because these are pieces of art and not just button prompts. The benefit here is, and that is actually really fantastic, is that you can switch on the fly between your keyboard and mouse as well as controller configurations while playing the game. Just pressing a key on your keyboard switches everything over to the keyboard inputs, including keyboard prompts, and playing it on a controller, just pressing any controller button will switch them back to the controller icons. Fantastic overall. I really can't fault the developers in any real regard. It's a classic title that had very few flaws, if any, to begin with a fantastic delivery at 60 FPS stable in almost any configuration I can think of, on top of adding the necessary support for keyboard rebindings, mouse smoothing, and camera controls, to a fantastic title, and having it all run on modern resolutions up to 4K outside of the VSync issue. Really, no complaints at all, and I can wholeheartedly recommend Bayonetta on PC over on Steam if you think you might enjoy this kind of game. And honestly, even if you don't think you might enjoy this kind of game, because I personally am not much of a spectacle fighter or hack and slasher, I would still suggest you check out Bayonetta, because this is the creme de la creme when it comes to spectacle fighting, combo building, and general beautiful destruction mayhem causing creatures. Outside of the outlandish story, the over-the-top graphics animations, the absurdity of the entire thing, Bayonetta feels as good as they'd released on the Xbox 360, but now it's on PC with all the benefits that entails. So I have no issue recommending Bayonetta to anyone that might enjoy this kind of title, especially not at a price point of 20 euros or a regional equivalent. And if you're interested in Bayonetta, you can check it out with a link in the description below. And if you like this video, press that like button. If you didn't like this video, well, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And leave a comment. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like. We want to hear back from all of you. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. And until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.